I think we found ourselves a clue.
Scooby-Doo, where are you? Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Scooby Month on Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Make sure to stick around to the very end to see who will win a copy of this movie. Alright, on to the review. When news first broke of a crossover between two of my favorite franchises, I was ecstatic. Brave and the Bold is easily one of the most underrated Batman cartoons there is, and to see this version of Bat's return is wonderful. Some thought this pairing didn't make sense, but after just now finishing the movie, I can say, tonally, it fits. Obviously disconnected from previous Scooby-Doo canon, the movie marks this version of the gang's first encounter with the Caped Crusader, as they're inducted into the Mystery Analysts of Gotham. I thought this was a neat addition to the story, and could definitely be a slight hint as to how that future animated Scooby-Doo movie will function, with the gang being part of a bigger organization. As this is their first meeting, it's up to the Scooby Gang to help solve one of Batman's unsolved mysteries, which eventually leads to a new villain showing up, the Crimson Cloak. As far as villain designs go, something about him seems like he's a cross between a typical Scooby-Doo villain and a Batman villain. That's perfect, considering this is a crossover. Also, I like how it's not completely cut and dry as to who the Crimson Cloak is. There are plenty of clues throughout the movie pointing you different directions as to who he or she is, and it was a fun, wild ride to see that play out. And I like how the movie doesn't just end with them unmasking the baddie. In fact, the baddie gets kinda away, and they still have a lot more to do, and I thought that was really nice. Since I've been recently reviewing the new Scooby-Doo movies, I also can't help but note that this movie really does seem like a spiritual successor to that series. Unlike that series, it definitely doesn't have a problem with padding. Well, there is one moment that I think didn't need to be in the movie, and that's the car chase with various bat foes. It felt like unnecessary padding and didn't exactly add much of anything to the story. We already had Bats and gang fighting the Batman villains over at Arkham, and while it was not a badly scripted sequence, it certainly just didn't feel like it needed to be there. The only other complaint I can drum up is that the Scooby Gang and Batman being on the run from the police and superheroes, while certainly a common trope in superhero comics, did feel a little forced. Batman may be secretive and hard to work with, but the other heroes really should have given him the benefit of the doubt. In the end, this plot point also felt tacked on in order to generate some tension and extend the movie's runtime. The concept of this roadblock definitely could have worked, it just didn't pull it off that well in execution here specifically. But that's really as far as complaints go, at least my biggest ones. The rest of the movie is fantastic. There's just so much to love about it. It's humorous, the action is excellent and animated divinely, not to mention the moment when the gang dressed up as a Bat family. That was just perfect. And I couldn't help but notice that Daphne makes a really nice Batgirl.
You filled those suits well.
You're telling me, Batman. You're telling me. Since I'm still working my way through the Scooby-Doo franchise from the early days, one thing I couldn't help but notice is Daphne's usefulness. Now, I completely dispute the misconception of her being a helpless damsel in the beginning of the series, but it was interesting to see how useful she was in this particular movie, even if it amounted to rearranging the letters and words. This was a much better way to handle Daphne than, Scooby Apocalypse. And I don't know what's left to be said. It was just a near-perfect movie. Maybe there were a few moments where they sorta had to dumb Batman down to not completely render the Mystery Incorporated pointless, but those are sometimes the things you have to deal with in these sorts of stories. And it's not too bad, though Batman not knowing an anagram spelled out Edward Nigma was a tad bit glaring, but it could just be he wasn't thinking in that general direction. He still kicks plenty of butt and stretches his detective skills elsewhere. Scooby-Doo and Batman Brave and the Bold is a near seamless blurring of two of the most iconic series ever. It is a huge step up from some of the more recent Scooby direct-to-video movies, and I cannot recommend this movie enough. If you haven't seen it, go get it. Bearing that in mind, it's finally time to announce the winner of the Scooby Month 2018 giveaway. You will be getting your own DVD copy of this very movie. Throughout this month, on any Scooby-Doo related video that I released, every one comment would get you one entry into the giveaway, for a total of 10 possible entries through YouTube, with the additional possibility of 3 more entries via Patreon, which, sadly, no one did. And the winner is... Nicholas Evans! Congrats, dude, you just won a copy of Scooby-Doo and Batman Brave and the Bold. Go ahead and shoot me a message on Twitter, link in the description, with where you want me to ship the movie, and as soon as I can, I'll get it to you. To everyone who participated in this year's Scooby Month, it may not have been as successful as last year's, but I do appreciate you for joining me. I didn't get to do nearly as much as I wanted to do, and you know how late I was on these videos. Heck, we pushed right on into February, and I had to forsake all my other videos and my own sanity to get these videos out on time. Still, it was a blast. I plan to do more of these in the coming years, but for now, Scooby Month has come to an end. Thank you all for watching. Take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Growing up as a kid, I was really fond of 2 cartoons. One, you probably already know by watching this channel, and if you don't, it's Scooby-Doo. And 2, Courage the Cowardly Dog. The latter of which would come on early in the mornings and spook me before I went off to school. So, of course, when news reached me of a Scooby-Doo and Courage crossover movie, I was cautiously excited. It's actually a bit weird how long it took for Warner Brothers to stick 2 of its most cowardly dogs together for the first time, at least officially. You'd think it would be a match made in heaven. But hey, it's here now, or, well, it came out a while ago, I'm just slow to cover it. As you can easily guess, the movie centers on these 2 cartoon icons coming face to face and trying to survive an onslaught of spooky stuff in the bizarre town of Nowhere. Specifically, giant cicadas and a weird manor belonging to the mayor of Nowhere. I certainly didn't vote for him. The movie starts off with a bit of an odd segment where Scoob and Shaggy take selfies with the crook in a clown mask, but it turns out to not be some jarring inclusion of modern culture, and is this them following the advice of their self-help audiobook thing. Then Scooby hears an odd sound, does some incredibly weird dance moves, and runs off, leaving the gang to abandon a dude they had just captured and go chase him down. 1, that seems a bit out of character for the gang to let the bad guy go. 2, somehow Scooby makes it to Nowhere really quick. Obviously, it is a cartoon and whatnot, but I found it odd how relatively close Nowhere is to wherever the characters were. Like, you see some trees and greenery bleeding into the desert landscape in this shot, when in the show there would be nothing there at all. Am I nitpicking? Probably. It's not a serious deal in the grand scheme of things, but it does irk me a little bit. The meetup of the 2 franchises' lead characters is aptly awkward and wholesome at the same time. Scooby and Courage are really 2 peas in a pod, and I'm glad they're finally paired together. Muriel is as clueless as ever, constantly confusing the gang as riddle solvers instead of mystery solvers. And Eustace, voiced by Jeff Bergman, since the last 2 voice actors for the character unfortunately passed away in 2003 and 2016, is as cantankerous as ever, clearly not enjoying having some kooky teens in his home. Bergman does a decent enough job as the character, though when he first speaks, it is a little off-sounding to the ear. There's also a later scene of his, which we'll get to momentarily. It's quite a doozy. When you have 2 shows crossing over, you typically try to represent both shows' styles, not just artistically, but in how a scene goes down, and how it's written. So, for example, despite the fact Scooby and Courage are having one hell of a time with a drain creature, even the Mystery Gang doesn't seem to notice. I think that's kind of a classic Courage staple, if I recall. It's been a while. It does come off really weird, though, considering they're both screaming less than 5 feet from the others, but it still is funny. On the flip side, the manner setting involved a fair bit of the Scooby style, I guess, what with the investigation, the chase scenes, etc. Though it still obviously had a touch of the bizarre you've come to love Courage for, such as the mayor's mannerisms and the decorations. The movie really does balance and show off the best of both series, in my opinion. Not ever seen as a 10, but you can't help but love the stuff that the characters get up to. Like when the characters are being transformed in this particular scene, and Daphne basically becomes 8-bit Daphne. That's not something you see all the time with Scooby-Doo, outside of mirrors that show their 1960s incarnations. Speaking of that one scene, something I was worried immensely about this movie was how it might once again downplay the supernatural elements like Return to Zombie Island did, or Curse of the 13th Ghost, where Velma more or less gaslights everyone. Courage is always dealing with real monsters, aliens, and mythical beings. Would this movie also throw in some human in a mask so that Velma can write everything off yet again? Honestly, the more the film continued, the less likely it seemed that there's any possible explanation the gang could come up with for the events happening to them. Like, they legit fall to pieces or get turned into weird animals at one point. And to the movie's credit, they almost get through the entire film before the gang try to paint everything as the machinations of a guy in a rubber mask. Even if the culprits were humans and not the particular characters they're revealed to be near the end, really cool inclusion there, that doesn't account for anything else that happened in the movie. Additionally, they have 2 talking dogs with them, but apparently a talking cat and duck, that's impossible. I know it's a staple of the series, but you can't have them admit the supernatural stuff was real just this once. Again, am I nitpicking? Probably, but it's about my only biggest critique of Scooby Meets Courage. Besides, this scene.
I'm a well-to-do dude with a 1% freaking nightmare. Like a bank tycoon or the president, say if I care.
Yes, that is Eustace rapping. It comes out of nowhere, is never mentioned again, and is fairly uncharacteristic of Bags, in my opinion. It's not a horrible song, it's kind of catchy in its own way, but it really doesn't add much nor make any sense to include. Maybe as an extra on the DVD, in the style of those old Cartoon Network bumper advertisements they used to run, but just not as part of the film itself. The other part of the movie that doesn't fit similarly is Scooby, Shaggy, and Courage laughing from a fart joke. I could be completely off, but it really doesn't seem to fit either show's humor, so I'm not quite sure why the writers felt the need to make such a crude joke. It's more in line with the live-action Scooby-Doo movie than most of his animated appearances. Luckily, I still found the movie to be fun to watch in general, despite the inclusion of stuff that fell out of place. Some of my favorites were the manor, with almost any scene including the butler and maid. The chase music in the underground scenes was oddly good too, and really fit the Courage side of things. And interestingly enough, we're given an explanation for the crazy things that have happened in nowhere. The meteor. I'm not sure if this is the first time there's been a rationale for the supernatural in his show, but it was cool to get an answer after all these years. Given what happens to the meteor afterwards, I'm curious if things will become normal in the town, or if it's far too late for that. And before I forget to mention it, there's even a nice little message in the movie. Nothing you've never heard before, but it really fits in with Courage being there. Basically, Shaggy's self-help audiobook points out that courage isn't the absence of fear, but to continue on despite your fear. It's the kind of message you'd find in Courage's series, so it's pretty appropriate here. And is a nice way to wrap up the Courage the Cowardly Dog series all these years later, in my opinion. Scooby-Doo Meets Courage the Cowardly Dog is a solid crossover that brings together elements from both shows while doing them justice for the most part, even if some scenes or jokes don't come across very well. It's funny, it's creepy, it's wholesome, it's almost a love letter to Courage. Plus, it's almost certainly better than Return to Zombie Island. What more could you ask for? Hey, if you've seen the movie, please chime in with your thoughts on it below. What's your favorite scene? Let me know, I'd be interested to hear. And for more reviews like this one, consider subscribing and becoming a member for early access to videos. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Since there's been a significant lack of content these past couple of months, I decided to do some one-off reviews of animated movies, specials, and first episodes of shows I'm not reviewing full-time this week. Today, that is the animated movie Lego Scooby-Doo Haunted Hollywood, which is slated to release today, I think. The last time I saw a Lego movie, pretty sure it was the official Lego movie itself. After watching this movie, I may need to go back and watch the other Lego Scooby-Doo special that came out last year. Yeah, this movie was that good. It has all the humor you expect out of Scooby-Doo, plus the usual Lego spin. Brick references, hair coming off in humorous ways, and a few other moments that will likely get a laugh out of you or your kids. The movie follows a gang to Hollywood where Scooby and Shaggy have won a tour of a studio that's about to go bankrupt. Of course, as things usually go, the gang end up attempting to solve the mystery of the hauntings that have been happening on the studio. Not a wholly original plot even for the Scooby-Doo franchise, but there's just something about this movie that makes it seem fresh and funny, whether that's the Lego spin I mentioned earlier or a return to form for the old Scooby gang. As in, the gang acting more like their classic selves than their most recent Be Cool Scooby-Doo counterparts. Not to knock that show, as I think it's a fairly underrated reimagining of the classic formula. Despite a different style entirely, the movie seems intent on reveling in some good old-fashioned Scooby-Doo fun and mystery, minus the modern updates, aside from 2 mentions of viral videos and selfies found later in the film. That's something special about this movie, and indeed the franchise as a whole. While there's nothing inherently wrong with updating a series for a modern audience, sometimes you don't need to. Speaking of characters, everyone in this movie was on fire.
Daphne, what are you doing? I'm breaking in!
Figuratively speaking, of course. Even though the characters were all Lego toys, the voice actors, and obviously the animators, made them feel if they were alive. This included the new characters for the film, such as Junior, Chet Brickton, or Jarella. If anything, this has made me crave even more Lego Scooby-Doo movies. Or heck, just give us a CGI Scooby-Doo movie, because if this film has shown me anything, it's that a Scooby-Doo movie with scale can be a lot of fun. Seriously, this little 1 hour and 15-minute movie about Lego Scooby-Doo entertained me more than anything I've watched in the past 2 months. Obviously, there are some things that didn't sit well with me, but nothing too huge. There were just a couple moments that I didn't think needed to be included, and if they'd been removed, we'd have a shorter, better movie. Basically, what I'm getting at is, you should go buy this movie. It's got laughs, great action, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. When I first learned there was going to be a sequel to one of my favorite Scooby-Doo movies, I of course was excited. Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island was a great movie, one with a much darker tone than normally depicted in the franchise, and is a type of tone that I would love to see return. Unfortunately, as time went on and more about the movie surfaced, I started to have my doubts. From the shift in art style and tone to how the gang have been written in the last couple of movies, it seemed like this was going to turn out to be one of those be careful what you wish for moments. And in a way, yes, that's exactly what Return to Zombie Island is, on top of being completely unnecessary. If you completely ignore that Zombie Island exists, it's not a bad movie. It's got the same charm and humor as most any Scooby-Doo media has, minus some weird meta jokes and gags that at this point in time really take you out of the viewing experience, aka the gang realizing they don't talk to each other about anything but mysteries, even though we all know that's not true. But here's the rub. Zombie Island does exist, and this movie, while definitely not as offensive as some more recent entries into fan-beloved franchises, doesn't do right by the original in my opinion. The plot sees the gang return to Moonscar Island as part of a scheme to get them to be in a movie based on the events on Velma's blog. Yes, she has a blog. The issue is she views the events of Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island as unsolved, on account of her most recent characterization being to completely disregard any and all things supernatural, even if it happens directly to her. Now, while I understand Velma is and will always be the voice of reason and science, I think it's idiotic to do a sequel to a movie where something truly spooky went on, and then have her dismiss it as actually happening. She even does this in the previous film. And if this is going to be how they write her in all films, then please, Warner Brothers, do not release another sequel to a previous Scooby film where supernatural stuff actually happens. Thank you. I also found it odd that they dumped the style and tone of the original film for the current direct-to-video look. I guess since this movie is far less spooky than the original, it wouldn't have made sense to do that, but that's kind of my point. Why make a sequel to a movie that legit was scary at times, but then go in the opposite direction? Like, imagine if Friday the 13th Part 2 was a comedy. Now, speaking of that, retcons. Oh boy, I hate them in most things because the attempt is usually shoddy as hell and disrespectful, and this movie decides to retcon the gang being adults in the original movie to now suddenly being teenagers again. Right. Because Daphne was in charge of a TV show for a summer. That totally makes sense and isn't some weird Warner Brothers mandate of late to keep them teens. It didn't make sense in Curse of the 13th Ghost. It doesn't make sense here. Now, before this becomes an incredibly negative rant, or you think I hated every moment of this movie, I did find things to like. As I said above, the humor is there. Legit, Return to Zombie Island can be a really funny movie. Especially the new character, Alan Smithy. He's a huge highlight of the movie. His film Everything, Even Though I Could Die attitude is hysterical. The film is also really well animated, so I have to give the animators props for some outstanding moments. Also, Daphne as a zombie. Low-key kinda hot. But, yeah, I'm not sure how to feel about this movie or the future of WB's direct-to-video series. It seems they're intent on milking some good old nostalgia from us old-time fans, but then just disrespecting the canon of the series. At least in instances where there is a canon, anyway. I promise you, I will riot if they do a sequel to Witch's Ghost and have Velma spend the entire movie trying to disprove it ever occurred. Just fuck that. No thank you. In conclusion, if you've never seen Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island or are good at pretending things don't exist in order for you to enjoy something, Return to Zombie Island, it's not half bad. It's got just enough comedy and spooks to help you celebrate Halloween night the right way. Sadly, if you're a longtime fan like me, you'll maybe be turned off by some inclusions, or in this case, attempts to exclude elements from the first direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movie where the monsters are real. And if this is a sign to come of the next few movies, well, count me out. And that is it for me. I hope you enjoyed this one-off review of Scooby-Doo Return to Zombie Island. I know it was probably a bit too bitter for your liking, and I probably forgot to talk about some things, but we can always discuss that in the comments or something. For now, I'll leave you with this fantastic, if somewhat lewd, fan art of this redrawing of a frame from Scooby-Doo and Guess Who that swaps the roles of Daphne with Velma. I would love to see this. Thanks for watching, and goodbye. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Going into this movie, I had a lot of fears. Fears that the movie just wouldn't be good. After what I felt like were incredibly lackluster direct-to-video movies, and a paint-by-numbers reboot, not to mention some troubling leaks about this new Scooby-Doo movie, I was worried this was going to be another hot mess by Warner Brothers. I don't want to say those fears were entirely misplaced, because some of what I read about this movie actually did turn out to be in the movie, and Warner Brothers does have a bad track record in how it treats the franchise. Scoob wasn't really as bad as I'd feared. One of the leaks said the movie was more Blue Falcon plus Scooby-Doo and Shaggy than it was Scooby-Doo and Mystery Incorporated. This is more or less true. Scoob is the start of the Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe, and they start this off by teaming up Scooby with Blue Falcon. After a brief origin story which tugged at my heartstrings, and some setup for Mystery Inc. trying to find investors, we quickly dovetail into Scooby and Shaggy finding themselves hunted by Dick Dastardly, a classic HB villain. And from there, the movie basically becomes a Blue Falcon movie. Kinda. A good bit of the movie focuses on Scooby and Shaggy going on this grand adventure for Three Skulls with Blue Falcon and his team, one of which is a redesigned Dee Dee from Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels. I'm not a huge fan of her look in the movie, but it does incorporate some elements from her original outfit in that TV show. While Scoob and Shaggy are off doing all that, the rest of Mystery Inc. is actually left playing catch-up, trying to find their missing friends. They're either driving towards Scooby and Shaggy or being kidnapped by Dick. Fred, Velma, and Daphne do contribute to the plot at points, but I can understand feeling frustrated that the rest of the gang weren't more involved in the adventure from the start. But with so many characters to juggle in this movie, I wouldn't really put it past the writers to have done this intentionally just so it wouldn't be overcrowded on the screen every single moment. Splitting the team up does serve to shine a great light on Scooby and Shaggy along with their friendship, which of course has to be tested. I don't make the story rules, I'm just pointing them out. I did really like these parts, not gonna lie, and they were pretty emotional at times, and well written. There's this line towards the end of the movie from, I think, either Daphne or Velma, pretty sure it was Velma, where she says they finally figured out Scooby and Shaggy's role on the team. The heart. This is a callback to early in the film where Simon Cowell, yes, the Simon Cowell, describes Velma, Fred, and Daphne as the brains, tank, and empath of the group respectively, but dismisses Scooby and Shaggy as unimportant to the team. I do like this line at the end of the movie, and of course any fan of the series will tell you that it is true. Shaggy and Scooby are the heart and soul of the group. Plus, this line also manages to give Daphne a more specific group role, even if empath kind of sounds strange, and it's not like she necessarily needed to have like a term for what she does on the team, but whatever, there you go, she's the empath. Dick Dastardly is the main villain of the film, and he was really fun. Kind of odd at first, kind of an odd inclusion in this movie, since he doesn't have a huge connection to the characters, but he is utterly fantastic in the movie, from just his general mannerisms to his various disguises and whipping them off. It was great. I really hope we see more of Dick in the later movies, because I guess I'm just repeating myself. He was a fun villain for the movie. There's also this whole comedic scene partway through where he's just saying Dick a lot, because, you know, Scooby, of course, mispronounces things, and he mispronounces Dick as Rick, and Dick is constantly trying to, like, correct him, and it was such a weird, odd adult joke that I don't know if kids will get. I guess nowadays probably kids would get it, but I don't know. The tone of the movie makes the joke work. It doesn't come off like juvenile adult humor like you would have seen from the live action attempts at adult humor. Those were just really gross, and it felt like people didn't understand what Scooby-Doo for adults would be. And while this isn't necessarily what I would say, oh yeah, this is what Scooby-Doo for adults would be, the joke didn't come off like entirely crass. It might make you roll your eyes a little bit, like this next joke. The other adult joke is Shaggy mentions F-bombs, but it turns out he's referring to Falcon bombs. And I kind of rolled my eyes at that one, but I think that's like really the only other adult humor in the show. I mean, in the movie. And I don't know. They work a little bit better. Maybe it's because it's animated and it's not live action, but it didn't come off too unnecessary, I guess. I don't... too inappropriate, is what I'm trying to say. And speaking of Shaggy, actually, talking about F-bombs, it's so weird hearing someone other than Casey Kasem or Matthew Lillard voice him in the movie. He doesn't quite do a perfect impersonation. In fact, he doesn't do anywhere close to a perfect impersonation of these other voice actors, and it just sounds off for about, like, a third of the movie. I mean, after some time, you kind of get used to it, but I'm not 100% sold on Will Forte as the movie voice of Shaggy. Everyone else sounds mostly okay, like Daphne or even Fred to some extent, but Shaggy sounds sort of like a, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like a B-list Shaggy, or a discount Shaggy. That's what he sounds like. I don't know. Maybe I'll get used to it in time. Another odd decision that I didn't really get was to have Velma be Hispanic for some reason. I guess it's because her voice actress is Hispanic. So for some reason they're like, well, let's just take Velma and make her Hispanic. I didn't really get that. I mean, nothing about Velma Dinkley has ever to me screamed Latina. But for some reason they made that choice, and I don't know. It was just kind of weird, like a weird inclusion. It's like, okay, I guess. And while we're on the topic of bad, she also yells about toxic masculinity partway through the film. I could do without that in my Scooby-Doo media. Please and thank you. Another thing that was in the film that I didn't really enjoy was Captain Caveman. Well, it's not that I hated him or his part in the film. Not really. He just felt out of place. He was there to guard the last dog skull. There's a brief fight, and then he's never seen in the movie again. He doesn't even interact with Dee Dee, even though she was part of the Teen Angels with him in the original cartoon. It leaves me wondering, well, are they going to meet up in later films and join up? Will there be an iteration of the Teen Angels? Will the other Teen Angels actually even show up? And, why was there, like, this weird decision to, like, divorce the two characters from each other and have Dee Dee be part of Blue Falcon and not Captain Caveman? Part of me thinks that this was just kind of like a wink and a nod cameo by the writers to let us know that, yeah, they're aware Caveman exists. But really, his part in the movie could have been left out, and nothing would have really been lost besides a really funny fight. And speaking of that, there's actually a lot of other cool nods to Scooby-Doo and other Hanna-Barbera properties in the movie. But one of my favorite ones is there's a Hex Girl poster, which makes me really, really hope that they're in one of the other movies. I know that there's no hope that they even show up as a cameo beyond posters, but I want to see CGI Hex Girls. I have to see it. I'll die happy if I do, but I'm not holding out any hopes that they actually show up, because they're not like, they've only appeared in like a few of the, the shows and whatnot. They're not like a huge part of the franchise, and they don't really fit into this whole Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe, so I don't see it unless they like make an appearance at the beginning during a concert or something, and then that's it. The other thing that I noticed, which I can't even really say noticed, because if you don't notice it, you're not even watching the film, but early in the film, after the gang meet for the first time and agree that they're going to like hunt monsters and stuff, they recreate the opening theme to Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? But with how it looks in the movie, starting off as kids and then like they become adults or teenagers or whatever. And I thought that was really nice. There was a few moments where it just didn't work. It kind of felt stiff, but I really like it. I love it when they recreate the opening theme song. Didn't really work for like I think the most recent reboot, but I like this. Other than a few weird inclusions like dabbing or slang that will be incredibly dated even by the time this movie comes to DVD later this year, Scoob isn't really that bad a movie. I I think if you overlook some of the minor changes here or there, and the fact that Mystery Inc. plays a slightly lesser role in the movie, you might be able to enjoy it. I mean, it's enjoyable nonetheless, is what I'm feeling to get across. It's not there's not enough bad or weird in the movie to tarnish the overall movie. Even when you couple the fact that it's like, oh, it's more like a Blue Falcon film that Scooby and Shaggy kind of like hitched themselves onto. Even that by itself isn't terrible. The writing is still excellent. The CGI is pretty good for the most part. There were bits and pieces like the side characters, the why do I want to say NPCs? The characters in the background characters. Sometimes they looked a little off or stiff, and I wouldn't even hate to see them drop this CGI look for something closer to like 2D merging, like a mix of 2D CGI, you know what I'm talking about, that has been seen in some recent cartoon movies. But like the main cast themselves didn't really look that bad. Blue Falcon was a little bit annoying. If I'm being honest, I was so ready to hate him until I learned that he wasn't even the original Blue Falcon. Because like in my mind, I was like, oh man, they're effing up Blue Falcon. And then it's like, oh, this is his son, who's a bit of an idiot. I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit more. It's a different character, all right, a character who's more focused on the social media aspect of being a superhero than the actual superheroing. And he has some growth through the movie. Probably not enough to be the point where he becomes like a serious superhero like his dad, but he does get some growth during the movie. I mean, it should. He's in like every scene involving Scooby-Doo and Shaggy for the most part, because it's like basically a Blue Falcon Scooby-Doo movie. But he's not too bad. I think Mark Wahlberg voices him, does a good job of playing this egotistical, like, buffoon who just wants to live up to his father's legacy, even if that sometimes includes dabbing, which, like, that was, like, one of the first scenes we see him in. So, of course, you're going to sit there and go, I hate this guy, because he dabs. No one dabs anymore. No one dabs! It's 2020. No one dabs anymore. Of course, I guess by the time, when they were working on this, people might have been dabbing, but who dabs now? Who dabs? No one dabs. Sorry, I know movies shouldn't, like, stray away from stuff that will date it, but in this, like, social media heavy focused time that we live in, memes, trends, they rise and then die quickly. So when you throw them into a movie that takes years to make, they're gonna be like completely out of context and like dead by the time the movie comes out. It's just facts. All right, it's just not gonna make sense anymore. Luckily, dabbing and then like this one other part in the movie is probably as dated as this movie. Like, the rest of the movie is like good. There's not like a whole lot that by the time this movie comes out on DVD, people are going to be like, "What? This is really dated and out of outdated and whatnot." But let's put that rant aside. Moving on. My faith in the Scooby-Doo franchise has actually been somewhat restored by this solid first entry in the Hanna-Barbera universe that they're creating. Because the last two movies that I had watched, the direct-to-video movies, they just weren't great. On the one hand, you had Warner Brothers reviving the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo timeline. They took that, and they're like, we never finished this. We never gave it a conclusion. Let's make a movie to conclude it. Only for the movie not to actually do what it set out to do. It's like, we're going to make a movie to conclude the story, and then they don't. It doesn't really answer a lot of the questions. In fact, it just doesn't do anything, really, from what I had seen. It's like, oh, that wasn't even the actual 13th Ghost. And it's like, oh, it's just, smoke and mirrors. And it's just like, okay, if you weren't going to actually conclude it, why'd you make it? And then one of my most favorite Scooby-Doo movies, Zombie Island. Such a good movie. Tonally, the humor, the writing, the art, it all is just eerie and, spooky. It's like the perfect Halloween movie. It's not too scary that it'll freak out kids, but it's like just got enough edge that an adult will still enjoy it. It's, it came at a time where Scooby-Doo was not like really embracing some of the darker elements. It has like some of the horror aspects, I guess, even though we would later get some of that stuff in Mystery Incorporated. And this movie comes out, and it's like, they're adults now, they got their own jobs, they've gone their own separate ways, but now they're back, and they have this and now the monsters are real. That was like the tagline, the monsters are real. How do you top that? Why do you return to it? And they do Return to Zombie Island, came out last year. I did a review for it, I had to think. And it was awful. It brings them back to to Moonscar Island as if it's going to answer questions. All it did was actually leave us more. You took a story that had already concluded, bring it back, add nothing of importance to it except a fourth werecat, completely ignore the fact that you've left a fourth werecat on the island, and then that's it. It didn't add anything to the original story. It didn't introduce us to anything interesting or new other than that werecat. And then even then, it completely left the werecat. So you had 0 questions at the end of Zombie Island. And then Return to Zombie Island leaves you with questions. It was perfect the way it was. It shouldn't have been touched. Anyways, this isn't a review of Return to Zombie Island. This is Scoob. And I've ran it on for too long. But this movie has actually, made me not be as pessimistic about the future of Scooby-Doo. Maybe the show, maybe the direct-to-movie direct-to-video movies, but at least the cinematic Scooby-Doo experience has a bright future ahead of it. If it can kind of like tinker with it a little bit, maybe make the next Scooby-Doo have a bit more to do with Scooby-Doo, although I guess if this is a cinematic universe, we're probably building to including more characters. So I hope it doesn't get bogged down in some of what other studios the missteps other studios have made in trying to repeat the Avengers Marvel formula. Marvel hit a gold mine, and they actually, they struck it it was like lightning in a bottle, and very few studios have managed to really repeat that. And the ones that have somewhat found the path that they want to go on have had massive missteps. Like, you had Marvel, who did really well, although some would probably criticize some of their later films. Then you had DC, who just had misstep after misstep after misstep, and then of course correction, another misstep. Still doing really well for themselves, but just completely stumbling over these hurdles. Tone, comedy, they just couldn't get it right, and I don't even know if they've still gotten it right, but they're still trying. And then you have the dark universe with the monsters. They tried it once with Dracula, it failed. They tried it again with the Mummy, it failed. They're just not, but hopefully Warner Brothers, Hanna-Barbera, they have something. They have these fun characters who have interacted before, limited, in limited fashion. They have these fun classic characters everyone loves and remembers, except maybe Captain Caveman and Adamant, unless you're an old person like me, who does remember them a little bit. In fact, they're in the it wasn't like a post credit. They're in the credit sequence. Captain Caveman, Adamant, Johnny Quest, even Jabberjaw, which makes me wonder, Pussycats? But if they're going to divorce Captain Caveman from Dee Dee, then I almost feel like they're definitely going to divorce the Pussycats from Jabberjaw. So I don't know. I just hope they don't cram these characters in without any real care to how they would mesh, how they would interact. This movie had a limited cast, right? Like, yes, they brought in Blue Falcon and Dee Dee. There was a cameo, so there was a mix. But if they're going like Avengers style, where they got like Captain Caveman, Ant-Man, Johnny Quest, freaking Jabberjaw or whatever, they need to make sure they don't cram too many elements in, because we've seen what happens when you put too many characters in the same movie. It doesn't work very well. So basically, my advice for Warner Bros. Is, you made a good movie, now don't screw it up this time. All right, that's enough rambling from me. A lot of this was not in the script for this video. I just got ad-libbed. So, yeah, I guess. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you thought of it. Did you enjoy this reboot of the Scooby-Doo movie franchise? What did you like most about it? What did you dislike the most? Leave that all down in the comments below, and I will see you later for more Cartoon Hangout content, hopefully less rambly. Take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. It's funny that after 2 years of having this movie's file sitting on my computer, I finally sat down and watched it. That's how bad I tend to procrastinate on doing these videos.
Now let's see how it looks so far. The red time!
If you're new, you'll learn this very quickly. So, now that I've gone and finally seen Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo, what do I have to say on it? Well, it's a weird movie.
Then we chew it to produce a sticky resin thusly.
Why is it weird? Well, I'll tell you. In order of weird, the least weirdest thing about the movie is Elvira. Yes, the Elvira is in this movie. If you're younger than 30, you might not know of her. She's an old school horror movie hostess, as well as star of her own films and comics. It's not that odd, because this isn't the first time she's appeared in the Scooby-Doo movies, though I think it's her first full appearance, at least as Elvira. There was that Lego Scooby-Doo movie where she shows up as Drella. See my review of that film if you're interested in that. She plays a bit of a mentor role to Daphne in Happy Halloween, more or less using her to carry her equipment, or even possibly be bait for the monsters. You'd think a celebrity cameo would distract from the movie's plot, but honestly, I enjoyed Elvira here. She's like Spider-Man, always quipping.
Wow, you're a regular Mary Sue!
But easier on the eyes. She and Daphne play really well off each other, especially with how zany Daphne is this go-around. More on that in a bit. Then you've got Scarecrow, one of many villains that Batman has to contend with in his series. You might know him more from the early Christian Bale Batman films, or maybe even that Gotham show. His whole shtick is basically fear toxin. He's here too, which is weird, but not too weird since the Scooby Gang have teamed up with Batman before, so it makes sense Crane would exist in the Scooby-Doo universe. He's honestly fantastic in this movie. Dwight Schultz, also voice of Dr. Animo in Ben 10, really sells the character's creepy presence. You'd think with Scooby not being all that serious a franchise, maybe he turned out to be a bit of a joke, but no, he's been done justice. And in a Scooby movie of all things. There's so many scenes that he outright steals in the movie, from cracking Velma's confidence, capturing him, to him not knowing about the jack-o'-lanterns, to this amazing scene.
There is no time for bravery! Run!
The writers absolutely nailed Scarecrow, something that not all Batman writers even managed to do. And the fact he wasn't just briefly in the prologue and gone again is also amazing. Next up in weird is Daphne. You all know Daphne. She's the gorgeous, ginger, sometimes genius fashionista of Mystery Incorporated. Contrary to what Velma's showrunners would have you believe, she's got character, and plenty of it. But this is probably the strangest iteration of Daphne there is. If you haven't watched Be Cool Scooby-Doo, that is. I remember hearing about this back when the movie first came out in 2020. Supposedly, one of the writers, or someone from Be Cool Scooby-Doo, worked on the movie, and wrote Daphne more like her Be Cool version. Hence, explaining all the wacky as hell things she says and does in the movie. Like this.
This is what we do. Word.
Or even this.
We've always solved mysteries, and we always will. Nothing but net.
I'll say what I thought back then. I love Be Cool Scooby-Doo, but I'm not sold on Be Cool's version continuing past that iteration. It was a great twist on an already great character, but I'm still fond of classic Daphne too. And so it was definitely jarring to see regular Daphne act like Be Cool Daphne for over an hour. And weirdly, despite loving that version of the character, I found it to grind on my nerves a little. Maybe it's just the dissonance of seeing the classic design versus the Be Cool Scooby-Doo Daphne personality. That said, it was only irritating for a little bit. That's not to say it didn't stop being weird, but Daphne has plenty of brilliant moments throughout the film. Badass moments, cute moments, crazy moments like what even?
Wait, were you just trying to replace Elvira and take over her life?
She's done this before.
And whatever this scene was supposed to mean.
Have you ever done circus work? You know, like getting shot out of a cannon, wrestling a bear, breathing fire.
Not officially for a circus. No.
So, while it was weird, much like Be Cool Scooby-Doo itself, you eventually grow used to it and develop a fondness for this bizarre version. And also, not to perv out or anything, but there's the reveal that Daphne and Elvira swap clothes while driving, which means, well, I'll let you imagine that scene. So, what was the weirdest, take a shot for every use of the word weird in this video, moment in Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo for me? Fucking Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Why was he in this movie? The only thing I could think of was his show came back a few years ago, right? So maybe that's the relevance of his being in this movie? Or him having an episode in Guess Who? I don't know, but it was a strange choice. His role is essentially helping the gang out by giving them a new ride, delivering some science facts, and then he vanishes a little from the movie.
Hang on 1 second.
Wait, what? Mr. Nye?
They could have used anyone else for his character, and I think it still would have made more sense. But moving on, some standout moments of note is this little acknowledgement of Fred and Daphne's relationship.
My love!
No, Daphne made it out with Elvira. They're right up ahead.
Granted, they took that and made it a weird thing about the van, but us Fred-Daphne shippers take what we can get. And before I end off the video, there were a couple of other weird moments in the movie, but those turned out to just be references, like Fred ripping his shirt off and setting traps. A super bizarre scene that had me rolling my eyes until I learned it's referencing Predator. Or this line from Velma.
Mr. Nye, get us out of here! Ludicrous speed, engage!
That's referencing Spaceballs and Star Trek. To wrap up with some final thoughts on the movie, I think while certainly one of the oddest Scooby-Doo movies there's been, it somehow managed to take all those haphazard, random elements and turn it into something fun. Hell, it even wrapped up a running storyline from the past 3 films with the sheriff character in an almost unbelievable way. No, seriously, even for a Scooby-Doo fan, I found it very contrived. Glow sticks? Come on. But at least his storyline is over because he was really starting to annoy me. And I believe that's all I have to say on Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo. It was a fun movie, filled with weirdness, but it worked. But what about you? Did you see it back when it came out? Leave a comment below on what you liked or disliked about it. Oh, and the artist for the thumbnail? It's in the description, so please go and check them out on Twitter. They do fantastic art. Thanks for watching, and take care.
I don't want to be you, silly. Just to look and think like you, but still have free will.